This is The Speaking Show. I'm David Newman, and you're tuned in to the #1 podcast for speakers, consultants, and experts who want to speak more profitably. Doc Champagne, yes, it's his real name. Please welcome Dr. Matthew Champagne. Great to have you on the show.
Hey, thanks, David. Thanks for having me on.
Now, do you get some flack for that name, Doc Champagne? Do people are like, come on, your name's not really Doc Champagne?
I hadn't thought about that till I was on a couple of interviews with some fiction writers who do science fiction. And they're like, Doc Champagne, that sounds like an evil villain. So they just love that. And they're like, we're going to call our next evil villain Doc Champagne.
There you go. Well, you aren't actually. You're the opposite of the evil villain. You are the hero of the story because you help people with engagement and keeping their customers for life. And one of the things that you sort of rant against that I would love to hear about, and we'll get into webinars and surveys and how speakers can keep their audience for life, but you talk about dark psychology. And obviously that is the evil empire. What is dark psychology? And then what's sort of the alternative, the better, faster, smarter, cleaner version called?
That's a deep topic. Most people don't know that this is where it comes from. The tactics that we use come from post-World War II. At the question to psychologists at the time, I'm a psychologist, the study was, are people evil or can nice people be influenced to do what they know they shouldn't do? And it set off tens of thousands of studies. But they were really heinous studies so bad that I can't perform them. Psychologists can't do these because they manipulated subjects. They were studies of conformity and obedience. They put subjects in fake prisons. They had them shock each other. So we learned a lot about human behavior, but there's studies that are so bad we can't do them anymore. And what happened was a researcher put all these studies into a single book called Persuasion. And your audience might know that book. If you look at the table of contents, you'll see the names of all the studies. We called them conformity and obedience. He called them urgency, scarcity, authority, reciprocity. That's where they come from. So when you use those tactics to bring in an audience and you're taught by the digital marketers, these are the tactics to use, and they feel icky. They feel kind of unsettling. There's a deep psychological reason for that. That's where they come from. Not to say they aren't effective. They are effective. But the roots of those techniques go to dark psychology. And so I teach people, there's a whole lot more good psychology out there that's just as effective.
So I want to just run this theory by you because I do a lot of webinars. Our audience does obviously a lot of virtual presentations, Facebook Lives, live streaming, webinars, teaching webinars, sales webinars. If you use some of this dark psychology, has it been your experience based on all the huge amounts of data that you've collected? You say it's effective. I'm wondering, is it effective in bringing in lower level people who are more desperate, more needy, perhaps more poverty focused, as opposed to the real kind of clients that most of us would like to have, which is the high achieving, already successful, highly intelligent people where these Jedi mind tricks might not work on them. Have you found there to be a separation that the dark psychology works on lower level people, whereas what you teach tends to work on higher level people?
Yeah, that's a great question. I believe so, but I'm a data guy. So unless I have data to back this up, I don't want to say for sure, but that is my thought as well, because the good psychology taps into those needs that we all want. We all want to know our voice was heard, what we said made a difference, how we compare to others. We want to know we made an impact. And those are the people that we want to keep. Those are our best customers. And I always tell people, well, you can sprinkle on the scarcity and the urgency and the reciprocity and the authority and all the dark psychology because it does draw some people in. It gets people to make decisions. But I think I'll agree with you on that using it primarily and solely is going to be bringing in not your best customers. It's just bringing in people temporarily. And that's not where I want to be.
Yeah, absolutely right. So we're going to talk about webinars. We're going to talk about surveys. We're going to talk about live events. Is it okay if we start with webinars?
Sure. That's a great place to start. There's so many people doing them now with everyone pushed to virtual.
Yeah. So talk about some mistakes. Before we flipped on the microphone, you say, I see so many people doing mistakes and wrong things that are actually counterproductive to their goals, that are not helping them and not helping their audience. What are some of the webinar mistakes or just some of the engagement mistakes? Because obviously so in a webinar, let me just kind of lay this out so my thinking is straight. We want to get them to sign up, show up, stay till the end, take the call to action, and then ultimately buy something. So those are kind of like the 5 persuasion points that I see. So even in getting them to sign up, right, that's an engagement. Getting them to show up, that's an engagement. Getting them to stay till the end, that's an engagement. Talk about engagement in the kind of big picture sense, and then let's drill down into the webinar material that you teach for your clients.
Sure. So let's talk about show up. We know that show up is a very small percentage. And the question is, well, why aren't these people showing up? And what I've seen over the last 6 years now that I've been involved in the digital marketing world is we're all doing the same thing. So we kick off the webinar when you register for the webinar with the annoyance factor. That is, you get the confirmation saying, hey, webinar starts in 48 hours. Then you get the email. Webinars tomorrow, be there. Webinars in 6 hours. Hey, webinars in an hour. Hey, my webinars and you're like, really? Does your doctor do this? Does your dentist, does anybody that set an appointment badger you? You would think there was something wrong with them. But for some reason, the gurus teach this. It's built into the webinar tools. So what I tell people instead is, no, let's use some good psychology. Use what I call a survey conversation. And that's what everything I do is built on this conversation with people. My clients, when I do a webinar, they register. And then at that point, there's a notice there saying, hey, I've just got a couple of questions for you. If you'll answer these questions, I'll share with you who else is going to be there, what their problems are. So we ask them, like, what would make it worth your time to be there? What questions do you want answered? We have a series of questions that we ask. And then when they send them the reminder, we say, hey, webinar starts tomorrow. Oh, by the way, 32% of the people who are registered are in this industry. And 6% have this question. Here are the top 5 questions that people wanted answered. Isn't that interesting? Then when we send the follow-up reminder in an hour, we say, oh, well, I just want to let you know that we heard your voice and we put your information here together. And we found that, 28% of you are in this field and this question. And people are like, whoa, now I know who's at the party. And we have found over the years, the data is about 41% higher show-up rate. When you close the loop, you share with these people what others are thinking about the webinar, what questions they want answered. They know it's important that they show up.
So that is, dare I say, treating your webinar attendees as intelligent human beings.
Yes.
And not as numbers that you want to see on your attendance screen and go, oh, look, we got, 74 people instead of 73 people, but we're treating them like actual human beings and not just buying units.
Exactly. And it's what people want. They want to know that their voice was heard. If you ask them a question, that you heard it, you responded, you showed them how they compared to others. It's actually priming them in this survey conversation, because this isn't the end. This is just the beginning, because I want to continue to ask my people questions through the webinar, beyond the webinar, and in the months to come. And that's the keep your audience forever, is they're continually knowing when they open up your email and answer your question, you're going to give them something back in return, something they can't get anywhere else.
Now, what other kind of bad mistakes or oversights, either things that we're doing wrong or things that we're not even doing at all, like with these survey questions, the survey conversation, what else are you seeing out there in either a webinar type format or live stream video or any of these things that people are doing now? What are some of the mistakes and oversights?
The next thing that happens, and we've all seen it, is the insults. That is, that camera turns on, you show up for the webinar, and sometimes they'll wait. They'll say, well, we were going to start at 1, but we got to wait for people to trickle in. And you're like, wow, this is kind of wasting my time. But when they start the webinar, the first thing you'll hear them say many times is, all right, everyone, put away everything you have. Shut your browsers, put your phones away, put your notes away, because I want all eyes right up here, because what I'm saying is far more important than anything that you could possibly be doing. And I'm like, did you just say that? Is this how you would treat people in real life? You meet a client, at a restaurant, and you say, okay, I have something important to tell you, close those books. I want your eyes up here. You would think there was something wrong here. But for some reason, we think it's okay to do that. But imagine the people even on the replay who are watching it, which is most people, and you're sitting there telling them how important this is. I don't know. The solution to this is to continue that survey conversation. I've already asked the right questions in the right way before the event. So when that camera turns on, I say, welcome everyone to the event. I asked you some questions about why you would want to be here. Here are the top 6 reasons that are, the questions you want answered. I have some material to present to you. It's really important. I know you need to know this, but first, let's tackle your questions. And people are like riveted to you. You don't need to demand their attention. You already have it. And that goes with all the pre-questions. Hey, where's everyone from? And all this sort of stuff that is, the people watching the replay have already tuned out. I've already asked them where they're from before the event. So when the camera turns on, I can say, welcome everyone. We have 12% of our audience is from the UK, and we have 10% from Australia. We got, 32 people right here in Atlanta, Georgia. And then I'm right into it, answering questions. So that's where the engagement is. When you use that technique, we find on average about 52% more engagement. People don't leave your webinar, and they get there at the start because they know there's good information right from the get-go.
So this is such a mind blower. I mean, people need to rewind, re-listen to the last 3 minutes, answering questions at the beginning. 99.9% of people say, oh, and we'll do a Q&A at the end. And the Q&A at the end is either about the content or about the offer that they just heard, nothing about the attendees, nothing about what they want, what their urgencies are, what their priorities are, what the highest value answers, insights, and information that they need. So we prepare our material, and then Doc, am I right that the beginning is, hey, here's the top 6 questions. Let's knock those out right now. And you might spend, 10, 15 minutes on those audience questions. And then you say, let's get to our teaching content for today.
Yep, it can be quick and easy, things that you know. I also tell people, bring up stuff you don't know. Say, well, people ask this question about, some topic. I'm not a specialist there. Is anybody else out there a specialist? Just hit me in the chat box and we can connect you. And this is what we do at live events as well. And that speaker looks like a genius because they already know the audience and they already know what questions the audience has. And I've seen folks like Andy Mason, Ray Edwards has done this as well. You stand on stage and say, here's why you came here, bing, bing, bing. And here's some things that I don't know. Does anybody in the room, specialize in, distribution channels? Or is anybody else here an author? They raise their hand. Okay, you two, once you connect at the break, and people are like, wow, this was so worth my plane fare and my hotel and everything because I'm getting my questions answered. It's not as big as stakes, of course, on a webinar, but it's the same principles. Don't waste people's time. Give them answers to the questions that they came for.
Doc, there's so many reasons I love this. Reason number 1 is we would tend to do this with our clients. So if you have a client, of like a group coaching program, and someone is stuck with a certain kind of thing, and let's say one of our clients is doing a survey, and I say, oh my gosh, well, do you know Doc Champagne? Let me introduce you. Doc is amazing. Doc is awesome. He's going to help you do the survey the right way and not the wrong way and the stupid way. You two need to talk. We would do this with clients. We would do this with friends. We would do this with colleagues. On a webinar, and again, the temptation is, and the bad habit is, to treat them like sheep. And they're not sheep. They are your future clients. So why wouldn't you do this introducing and connecting and networking with your prospects, get them to fall in love with you and say, oh my God, I was just on a webinar with Doc Champagne and he connected me with 2 fantastic resources, 3 ideas that'll make me money right away, and 4 fantastic people that I'm now going to have a networking relationship with and be able to use and help or get help from. That is a mind blower. Can I just say that?
You may. And the data backs you up. I brought up Ray Edwards. I'll bring him up again. Before his live event, his attendees, we asked them questions before the event. We did this survey conversation. We learned why they would be there. We fed that information not only to Ray and his team so that he could give an incredible event, but we fed it to the speakers. And one fellow in particular, he was a branding expert. And I showed him the results and said, I'm sorry, Mike, branding didn't make the top 10 reasons He didn't change his whole presentation, but he took the top two issues. One was mindset. Another was, how to write headlines or something. And he went right on stage and said, I'm going to teach you some things about mindset. Of all the people in the room, every one of them, when we asked them immediately after, did this person help your business? 100%, because they got what they needed. So now he did tell them a little bit about branding, but he focused first on why they were there. So you can always get your information out there that you believe is important, but also to address, their highest priorities first.
Hey, good looking. Are you currently getting paid to speak? Would you like to ramp that up? We can help. Book a confidential speaker strategy call with our team at doitmarketing.com/call, and let's see what we might do together. The call is free, but the results may be priceless. Now, you mentioned surveys and the survey conversation in the context of webinars. I know you also help people with surveys of all different kinds. And I know that, these survey tools are out there. People use SurveyMonkey or Google Forms or whatever, and they ask ridiculous, stupid questions that would, number one, no one would ever answer accurately. And number two, they're the wrong questions to ask to begin with. So for example, how much would you pay for this product? 500, 1,000, 1,500, or 2,000. Now, no one's going to answer that in any sort of way that's going to give you any sort of intelligent information. You ask me, hey, David, do you want to pay 500, 1,000, 1,500? I'll be like, you know what? 500. Who doesn't love a bargain? Who would say, no, Doc, I'd rather pay you 2,000 than 500 because I think you're so handsome and wonderful. So let's talk about surveys, and let's talk about the survey conversation a little bit bigger and broader than just on a webinar. What kind of craziness do you see? Because I know you've got hundreds of thousands of data points, probably millions of data points from all these surveys that you've done, because that's sort of your background. What are we doing wrong with surveys, and how can we fix it?
Well, I've spent my whole career doing that, almost 28 years now, trying to teach people how to ask the right questions in the right way, how to get higher response rate. I wrote a book called The Survey Playbook that has the 25 biggest mistakes made when you write surveys. So the quick fix is to look that book up and don't make those 25 errors. If you do that, you're ahead of 99% of everyone that does surveys, because for 25 years now, they just keep making the same errors. One issue that I was reminded of was response rate. And very few people think about that. They'll say, well, I asked my people and they said this, or I put a post, poll up on Facebook asking them a question, or how much would you pay for this product? And I said, well, how many responses? And they say, oh, I got 50 responses. And I'm like, well, is that 50 out of 100 people? Is that 50 out of 100,000 people? Like, are those responses representative of your people? Almost always, they have no idea. They just get some data and then they act on it. And I just shake my head. I'm like, you cannot do that. You need to know if this is true. So when I do a survey, if I don't get 50 or 60% of people to fill it out, to me, that's a fail. And that comes from my background in the university. If you evaluate instructors and you showed up in their office and say, here you go, professor, here's what your students said. Here's 30% of your students said this. She'd throw it in the trash. She'd say, until I get 80%, I don't know this is true. And so much of all the decisions made in companies, and I've worked with, some of the biggest companies in the world, right down to the smallest, solopreneur operation, they all make the same mistake. They just act on the data they got. Why? Because it's all they have. And they make their business decisions on that. So that's one of the many big mistakes I see.
So this is profound, because most people listening are going to be in that kind of solo expert, small consulting firm, agency type business. They're going to want to survey their email list. And they say, let's just pick a small number, like 5,000. Let's say our email list is about 5,000 people. We send out the survey, and I'm guessing that we're not going to base our number on 5,000, but let's say 20% open rate, 1,000 people opened that email. From 1,000 people opening that email, for you to say, oh my gosh, you need to have at least 500 responses out of those 1,000 people that opened your email, that's a very, very high bar. How do we come close to that? What are some techniques that would increase people wanting to take our survey?
Yeah, I've distilled it. I call it the 9 principles of customer feedback. They're just 9 psychological principles that go back decades. I've just fine-tuned. I've gathered about 96 million data points over the years to fine-tune this and apply it. But if you use these 9 principles, you'll get those sorts of response rates. And when people see it, they're like, well, that's, we all know only 5% of people answer surveys. I'm like, no, I get 70%. And they think the data is fake until they look at it. And I said, well, here's one technique is what we just talked about with the webinars. You ask a question. It's called a survey conversation. It's not asking every question you want to ask at once, like we all get hit with every day. I'm just asking a couple of questions. Well, what do you think about this? And you'll get low response rate because people don't like to fill in surveys. But then you do something they've never seen. You close the loop. You share the results with them and say, thank you for responding or not responding. Here's what other people said. 32% said this and 15% said that. I have another question for you. And now people are like, whoa, there's something going on here without me. Decisions are being made. I better answer this one. And then more people answer. And then you close the loop and you share some, not all the results, just a couple of nuggets of results with them. And I say, I have another question. So you get all your questions asked, but it's in a conversation form. And what we see invariably for 20 years now is the response rate goes up and up and up and up. And people are just locked in. They know every time they open your email and answer your question, you're giving them something they can't get anywhere else. And this is what we did. I spent a lot of time this year with the cruise line industry, surveying travel agents worldwide. And we were getting 60 and 70% response rate. How did we do that? That same methodology. You're saying, here's what other travel agents are doing with their clients. Here's what they have found to be successful. Here's the top 5 techniques that other travel agents have used to keep people to, keep their reservations and not cancel. And now they can't wait for that next. And they even asked, just like all my clients ask, when's the next survey? It was like, well, how crazy is that? People asking to fill out your survey, but they do because there's a huge what's in it for me.
Man, so I'm just channeling our audience here, Doc, and I've got 2 or 3 quick follow-up questions. Number 1, when you send these individual emails, are these like micro surveys, like 1-2 question surveys? And is that on a tool like Wufoo or Typeform or SurveyMonkey?
Yeah, it can be anything. I mean, I have my favorites. I've reviewed and critiqued about 85 online survey tools, and it changes over the years. Right now, Typeform and Question Pro are 2 of my favorites. None of them have everything that they should have, that they're built by programmers, not by, psychologists. But I use those, and you can use any tool to create your survey. So there's no particular technology needed.
No, right. But it's not like, hey, hit reply to this email, then you get all these text responses that you don't know what to do with. There is a survey tool of some kind.
Correct. Yep. Just send them to the survey tool, and then the response is usually in the email itself.
And is it literally 1 or 2 questions in these little micro surveys?
Yeah, usually no more if it's a particular client that has, that's what I tell a client, like, what's everything you would ever want to ask your prospects, your clients, your members, your students? We prioritize it all. And then we go 2 questions at a time. They say, well, this is really the urgent one. We ask these 2 questions first, close the loop, share the results, response rates builds, ask the next 2 questions. And we've kept this up after Ray's event. His was a live event. We sent them emails 7 weeks after his event. We had 78% open rates because they knew every time they open, they were hearing what other people who attended are doing with the information, what was working for them, what was not working for them. It was, why would you not answer the survey? And the answer is, you will. That's the point of the survey conversation.
So we're doing a lot of email communication. One thing that our listeners are asking themselves is, Doc, this sounds fantastic. I'm totally buying your book. I need to start getting in on this. What's the email subject line of these surveys and then the answers to the previous questions so that people know there's kind of a series, like you said, hey, the bus is leaving without you. The bus is already on the road. You can still catch the bus at the next stop, but this is happening with or without you. What's the email subject line of this series of survey conversations?
In general, we keep it consistent. So it always starts when we were doing the cruise line industry. It was the name of the Cruise Line Association. When you're sending them closing the loop and sharing results, we say, here are your results. And that appears to be one of the highest opening headlines. And of course, you would only put that if you have results. Otherwise, that would be dark psychology, right? So if you give a results, you put your results. But to just keep that consistent message in the first few words of the header is key.
But do we also say things like, hey, your next survey or 2-question survey? Or how do we identify this email as, oh, here comes that goodie that I was waiting for because I was eager for Doc's next survey. Here's the next survey. Or is it more subtle than that?
It's a little more subtle. We tell them, the words like feedback are good to put in the subject header. Survey I avoid just because I don't know how mail platforms, treat that word. If that's I'm not like an email marketing guy. So I avoid the word survey. Feedback is a key word I do. So it's usually an exchange between we need your feedback and the results.
What a great episode. Wowza. Tell you what, if you want to ramp up your revenue as an expert who speaks professionally, you should really check out our free online training at doitmarketing.com/webinar. Let's talk to another dimension of your expertise around engagement and conversation, which is you have some really brilliant ideas about how to engage and keep our customers for life. Whether that is in a speaking audience or a webinar audience, what are some of those longer term, keep your clients for much, much longer, don't let them wander off the ranch, and long-term love affair strategies?
Yeah, well, it all comes together when we talk about the survey conversation, when I mention the 9 principles of customer feedback. It's all the same thing. People want to know that their voice was heard, how they compare to others. They want to feel like they're making a difference, making an impact. And so when you give them a big what's in it for me, which is to take this action, I'm going to get these results that will help my business, then you don't need to pay them. You don't need, that's one of the problems with surveys is, enter my survey and I'll put your name in a drawing to win some, electronic device you already own. That's not what people want. And it's not a transactional relationship. I want it to be a relationship where you take your time. And that's what I tell people with my surveys. I tell them right off the bat, I say, I have nothing to give you that's going to be equal to your time. It's the most precious thing you have. You'll never get it back. All I can do is if you'll take a minute to answer this question, is I will share with you what people just like you said about it. Maybe that can help your business. Maybe it can help you make some decisions of your own. So that's one of the big keep your customers forever is just keeping up this conversation done one question at a time, just like you would do when you're talking with somebody. And then people don't leave. It would be just like you and I having coffee, and then I just got up and walked out the door. It's like, that wouldn't happen because we're talking, we're both getting some value out of this. So closing the loop, sharing the results, asking when it matters. That's another big issue. So often we ask these questions when it's too late. Like, when do they ask for our feedback? After the conference is over, after the online course is over, after your vacation's over, after it matters to nobody, they say, all right, David, give us some feedback. Take your time to help us improve our products and services. It's like, why would I do that? You won't. That's why the survey responses are so late. But what if we asked you while it was still going on, in the middle of the course, while the conference is still going on? And then we demonstrated, we heard your voice, and we made some modifications to the delivery or the timetable. And we told you, well, we made these changes and we heard what you said, but we can't fix that right now. It's just the way we have it structured. But at least we heard your voice, and people just can't get enough of that. They're so starved to be heard. Everyone asks us for feedback every day in our inboxes, surveys. Hey, you just bought a bagel at our shop. Fill out our survey. Everybody wants our input. Hey, you just waited on hold for an hour. How was our customer rep? Would you rate them a 0 to 10? Everybody keeps asking us for feedback, but nobody respects our time. Nobody shares the results. Why would I help you when I've already paid you or you put me through this experience? And that's what happens, of course. We all know it. People that respond to surveys are either really happy or really angry. But all the truth is in the middle from the people we never hear from.
Wow. So that's not only a conversation strategy and a client engagement strategy, this would have an impact on how we run the business. So the cruise line, for example, hey, it's day one of your cruise. Give us some feedback. How come there's no healthy choices on the buffet menu? And of course, there are most times healthy choices. It's like, oh, well, did you know that we have the salad bar in this other dining room that has 3 times as many healthy choices as in the main dining room? And so, or we just have to flex. People say, oh man, this conference is great, except, there's not enough time for networking. The next day, to be able to pivot and flex and to say, you know what, we've added 10-minute networking breaks at the top of every hour. Instead of the session ending at 10 a.m., it's now going to end at 9:50 a.m., and you're going to have 10 minutes to connect with each other. And it's going to be every hour, bottom of the hour for the next 2 days. People go, holy crap, I've never been to an event that A, asked for my feedback during the event, and then B, made changes to accommodate that feedback.
You got it. That's it right there. This is what I've been talking about for 25 years. We do it in academic conferences. There's just niches where this is standard practice, but so many more are not. And we've all sat at those events on day 2 with one more day to go. And you're like, should I even show up for day 3? Like, I'm not getting what I want out of this. When we do this for events, we give people the option to respond on their phone. We've had them use Alexa, like, hey, Alexa, like they're giving feedback while the event's going on. We're reporting this back to the hosts and the staff. And they literally do that. They literally say, we didn't get to this topic and it looks like it's really important. I know we end at 5, but if everybody wants to stick around, we'll do like maybe a drinks hour or something over here on this topic. In fact, we're going to set up 4 tables because I heard there were 4 main topics and you can just sit at your table. And you're right. People are like, wow, I would pay 5 times as much as I paid for this event because I truly got it. And this is my main, you hit on my goal. That's my mission, this is how events will be run. None of this, wow, should I go to this event? It's a lot for the hotel and uncomfortable bed I have to sleep in. And we have to make this decision. I want to know ahead of time. This event planner's already asked me who I want to connect with while I'm there. They've asked me what questions I needed to answer. It's a no-brainer. I'm there. I'll pay twice. I'll pay 3 times as much to get there. And then they deliver and they continue to modify it based on the feedback that they hear, or they tell me why they couldn't do it. And that is totally legitimate. People love that as well. Even to be told, well, David, I heard what you said about, this. I just want to let you know that 85% of other people said they were learning in this way. So I just want to let you know. And people really respect that. They say, oh, I thought everybody thought like I did, but now I see why we're doing this because it helps the most people. I'm cool with that. This is the reaction.
Look at the data, not the drama.
Yes, I love that.
There you go. So, Doc, this has been totally fantastic. 2 final questions for you. The final question is how can people get connected and stay connected to more Doc Champagne brilliance? But before we get to that, overarching kind of final thoughts, final advice for our listeners about how they can start thinking about these survey and engagement strategies to help grow their business. Kind of big picture, final parting words of wisdom.
I guess the biggest one is just assume everything you know about surveys is wrong. Because everyone talks about transformation. Airbnb is transformed. The hotel industry and Uber is transformed. I could pull up surveys from 1996 with the same headings. They look the same. Why hasn't there been any transformation with that? And that's because we're way overdue. So if you apply some of these principles, you will be part of that transformation. People hate surveys for good reason. They don't like to be sold to because of the dark psychology. There's a good reason. Need to rethink, how would you like to be asked? I guess that's my overall. How would you want to be asked this question? Would you respond to your own surveys? Would you respond to your own offers? And if the answer is no, then think about some of this good psychology and some of these other techniques instead.
Awesome. Well, Doc, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you. How do people get connected and stay connected to more Doc Champagne brilliance? We've got some downloads. We've got some links. Where can we send people?
Sure. The what I've heard from clients is the best next step is to read about these 9 principles of customer feedback. So we put together an infographic that illustrates them. We've talked about some of them, closing the loop, asking the right questions in the right way, but there's 9 in total. And you can get this in 2 ways. You can either go to matthewchampagne.com/doit, DOIT. And we put a page together just for your listeners that they can download this infographic and use it. Or if you're on the road listening, just send a text to 44222 and just put the word champagne. That's my last name. Champagne to 44222, and you can get the infographic in that way.
Totally fantastic. We're going to have all those links directly under this episode when you pop over to thespeakingshow.com. Under Doc's episode, you can see all the links to get all the goodies. And thank you. This has been hugely enlightening. I may even spend a little bit of time today launching my first 2-question conversational survey, and I will keep you posted. And we have to have you back. I know we only scratched the surface of so much of your genius, and so we'll have to have you back again.
Oh, I'd love that. I'm the ranting professor, they call me, and I've been at it a while, and I'm going to keep at it till everyone uses this good psychology to keep their customers forever.
Sounds like you've got lifetime job security.
Exactly.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.